So I was perusing the internet a few hours ago when I ran into a video by Amazing Lucas. I guess because I'm watching Spider-Man content sometimes, his stuff showed up on my feed because I haven't seen his channel since Elden Ring won Game of the Year. He talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Spider-Man reveal, but that's not the subject of my discussion. He did say, hopefully, there's also some kind of skill-based web swinging. Thinking about the game looking great and some things that he wants to see added to the game and so on and so forth. But the skill-based web swinging was the one that caught my ear, and it brought me back to something that had recently shown up on my channel where some audience members were pointing out that the swinging mechanic in my gameplay seemed out of place. In fact, somebody even thought and said, are you purposefully trying to play the game terribly to make the game look bad? And I was like, what are they talking about? Well, it wasn't until one of you in the audience, basically said, hey, go check your latency settings on PC, because on PC, I realized that I've been having lag. So shout out to you for actually helping me point this out. And I realized that VSync was on. If VSync is on the PC version, you're going to get this weird delay that can happen. And when you're swinging and trying to control your camera while you're in the air, VSync can do you in. And I also kind of turned on and off my NVIDIA latency settings. They did say it was going to help as well. So I think I'm back to Miles swinging properly around the world. So traversal is a big deal. Now, the conversation about web-based, swinging mechanics or web swinging mechanics is something that I'm curious about, or at least interested in talking on. And for those of you who may be able to distill what is being, said here by Amazing Lucas, and even some people here in the audience have mentioned something along the lines of that, I'd be happy to read your comments and see exactly what it is you mean by that, because I don't want to go interpret what you mean and then think about that in my own mind. Because when I think about, skill-based web swinging, I'm not necessarily thinking more about having a lot of player agency, and I'll explain why in this video. So one thing about the web swinging mechanic in a Spider-Man game is primarily for you to be able to quickly move around the world. That is exactly what it's for. Now, the physics aspect of it is a little wonky because there's a practicality side of it. And when I say wonky, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying you really have to lighten your character to be able to, get the speed that you're looking for. Because not only are you just swinging and moving across the world based on the traversal, there are other gameplay elements that require for you to be able to move around the world very fast. So when we look at things, we're looking at number one, being able to move around the world. That's number one. And number two, being able to move around the world very fast based on certain gameplay elements. And those gameplay elements are street activities, like when you're doing car chases, or like in the Spider-Man 2 game, as we got to see, maybe you're going to be doing some speedboat chases. One really fun thing about game development, and I understand a lot of people are very apt to point out that there are some things that they would love to see, but what I usually encourage people to do is whenever you're asking for these things, the best thing that you can do is possibly go ahead and put yourself in the shoes of the developers trying to make a game that works. And then whenever you look at a mechanic that you might say this mechanic could use improvement, look at that mechanic in the context of all what that mechanic has to do in the game. This usually gives you a better perspective as to why the mechanic is the way it is. So judging on those 2 points, point number one, being able to move around the world and move around the world fast, and being able to use the web swinging in the context of open world activities in a way that is intuitive, that makes sense. To me, I think right now, if the game that's coming very soon is anything close to what the Spider-Man games were in 2020 and 2018, I think that web swinging is absolutely fine the way it is. Now, this does not mean that other things like polish or the gliding mechanic is not welcome. I think those are welcome changes because, again, if you notice, the gliding mechanic is designed for a speed boost. What that tells you is Insomniac's game design requires a lot of fast adaptive play on the end of the player. So they want you to be able to reach destinations really fast, and they expect that if they're going to create a high-speed scenario or scenarios where there are high-speed chases, you're able to pretty much use this system to go about it. Now, when it comes to the skill-based system, my interpretation of it is not necessarily, seeing that there's anything much that the developers need to do. And this is why I invite you guys to, in the comment section, explain to me what it is that this person may mean in terms of skill-based web swinging. Because all I see is traversal as the primary aim, and then the way they've designed their game as another core aspect of why the swing mechanics are exactly the way they are. Every game usually comes with its own caveats whenever they develop systems, especially in superhero games, and whenever those systems are somewhat tied to or linked to traversal and open world activities. Now, we got to see Suicide Squad kill the Justice League. You got to see all the Suicide Squad members basically one way or the other traversing within the open world space in an aerial capacity. Some of them using different kind of abilities, while some of them were just using straight up jetpacks. Or like in the case of Harley Quinn, she was pretty much using some kind of a grapple mechanic to move across the open world in the air. They did have an aerial game, but at the end of the day, this is something that the game requires of you to be able to put together and make sense. Now, maybe that might not be your favorite example. I mean, it is, however, Suicide Squad. But if we maybe go and take a game like Gotham Knights, Gotham Knights was one where the developers made 4 different characters who all had 4 different methods of traversing the open world. The traversal was an eyesore for a lot of people in the game. Me, on the other hand, I didn't take too much issue with it because I understood these 2 things, that you needed to move around the open world as fast as you possibly could. And then the other side was, based on the different activities and paradigms within the game's open world, you needed to be able to make your way all over the place. So putting these together, it was quite interesting to see how everybody dealt with it, because some of the knights themselves, their own methodology of moving around the world was very unconventional. Like Robin, he would use, the Justice League teleportation system, which many people did not like. I thought it was interesting that it was even in the game. Then everybody had a base grapple mechanic, and then you had the really slow bat cycle, which that one you can chalk it up to them trying to stream an open world this big, and doing it fast was probably going to break the game even more. So these are aspects that if you start to look at them in a much more conceptualization way, like, okay, if you were building this mechanic to work in your video game, what exactly would you do and how is it going to tie into the rest of the gameplay? You start to see that it makes sense where the developers are coming from. And again, not to be too silly, the developers are also taking time to make sure that there are distinctives within the different Spider-Man characters. Example will be the way Miles swings and the way Peter swings, or in their web swinging animations and their web swinging behaviors, there is a distinction between both of them. You will know. You don't even need anybody to tell you who's on the screen at any given time. As long as you're able to see the animations that are actually being played in between web swings, you can already tell that it's either Miles or Peter. Miles has a goofy way of moving around the open world because they're emphasizing to you that Miles is a new Spider-Man. He's still getting, his traversal kind of down in a sense in this game anyways. And then in Peter's case, you can tell that he's a much more, seasoned Peter Parker, a much more seasoned Spider-Man. So his swinging and his movement across the open world is actually very clean, very pristine. So these are areas that I think there's already advancements, areas that there's already polish and improvements that we need to take into account as well, as much as we may be requesting these things. But it'll be interesting to see how all of this comes together in the next game, because now we not only have Miles and Peter, we're going to have Miles and Venom. Possibly there's a unique aspect to moving around the open world with the Venom-based Peter Parker that we're yet to see. But that's the end of my video. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.